Hey everyone, Joe here. I recently sat down for an interview with Johannes Nienaber, who's behind the one-man studio called Aligned Games. We covered a wide variety of topics from the development of Infiniwar so far, to the challenges indie devs face, trends in technology and the games industry, games that inspired us, and more. Johannes is a veteran game developer and has several shipped titles under his belt, so it was great to get his experienced perspective and also take a peek at some of the new projects he's been cooking up too. This was a lot of fun, so grab yourself a drink and I'll let Johannes explain a bit more before we get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel here. I'm starting a new series, which I'm just calling like indie dev community discussions or something like that. And I'm basically going to be having a chat with a few fellow indie developers and designers about video game design and about their histories and their backgrounds within the space and about technologies and just a bunch of stuff. So if that's something that you think you might be into, stick around. In this first one, I have a chat with Joe Theis, who is currently working on Infiniwar, which is a strategy-esque kind of game inspired by World in Conflict. So if that's something you'd be interested in, stick around, and I hope you enjoy it. So Joe, thanks for joining me. I'm excited about the chat, and I'm excited to learn more about your game and about what you do specifically. I've been seeing
Thanks for having me. Oh, sorry.
No, it's cool. I was going to say I've been seeing a lot of it on Twitter and on YouTube, and I've just started following, so I'm excited to have the chat.
Awesome, yeah. So am I.
Yeah. So I was just going to start by asking you, how you started doing game development, what it is you do, and sort of like your background. Also, you can just talk about what you do in terms of your normal day job, because I believe you have a day job. I think, if I recall, it was web development. And so just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm Joe, and I'm building a solo indie dev project. The game is called Infiniwar, and it's a stylized modern military real-time tactics RPG. My background is I went to school for computer science, but I wasn't very good at it. My GPA was carried by non-computer science and non-math, non-science classes. So a little bit of an unconventional background there. I went into business software initially, kind of boring stuff like insurance boring. But I did get a background there in C# and some web development and some product design and product management stuff. Eventually, I got bored of that, moved across the country from Illinois to California, and picked up a new job, more product management, QA, design type stuff, and eventually moved into more of the web front end development. And that's what I do. Most of my day job is React, TypeScript, and things like that. So I've gotten a little bit better at software development over the years, far from perfect. But that's where I'm at now. I've been with that company for 11 years and still going there. But more recently, I picked up game development because, I think one of the things you asked me was, why did you want to start game development? And I've always loved games. I think most of us have. You start early. The first real games that I got attached to were like SimCity 2000 and Civilization 2 and things of that era. I think that probably dates me a little bit. Some of those were probably out before some of you were born, but that's okay. Technology marches forward, and I think everybody who plays games more than a little bit has a fantasy of, oh, if I made a game, this is what it would be like. I would do this, I would do that. It's kind of inevitable. And especially if you play the kinds of games that I like to play, where you are building things, you're building your city, you're building your civilization, you're building, your factory. There's all kinds of games where you're building things, or, if you play Minecraft, things like that. Sometimes these games even shade into programming too. Like, Minecraft has its redstone, and Factorio has its circuits, and it's programming in disguise, or sometimes not even in disguise. It's just programming. You're dealing with, and gates and or gates and things like that.
So, like a starting point for some people. And I think, in terms of that kind of stuff, it's becoming more, in terms of like what people do at a younger age. I think it's becoming more prevalent because my friend has a young kid, and he told me they're starting to code now at like a super early age. I think it's like grade 3 here. I don't know what that is in America, but it's like, it's when I started, I started in like just after high school. So I think it's different. And you said, we all had games that we sort of wanted to replicate and play, the ones we like to play. And me and my friend at the time in high school, we had this game. I'm sure you played it because it's probably one of your inspirations, but it was I think it was Command and Conquer 4 at that time. And we
definitely.
And a lot of Call of Duty. At that point, it was like Modern Warfare, the original Modern Warfare.
Right, yeah.
And we always he didn't end up going into game development, and I did, but we always said that we would make like sort of like a hybrid between those two games. And that isn't something I've done yet, but definitely something I want to do at some stage. But that's sort of like a bit ambitious.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
And that's one of the things we'll talk about at some point in the call is scope management and scope creep and that kind of stuff.
Yes, we will.
But yeah, it's just it's interesting to hear where it comes from. And I think, I don't know how old you are, but I think we played similar games. Probably I'm 30 now.
Yeah, I'm getting close to 40. Not quite there yet, but it's rapidly approaching. So we've probably had some overlap.
Yeah. So what were the kind of games that you played as a kid?
Well, like I said, some of the early ones when let's not go back too far, but like the ones that were really formative were Civilization 2. I played that game for hours. One of the great things about Civilization 2 was all the files, the sprite files and the game rule files were just text files and images that were just on your computer. You could go and modify them in like MS Paint and Notepad. And then you had a modded game. Like there was no the friction for modding was basically zero. And that was really great. So I spent a little bit of time messing around with mods and modding things. One of the things that I realized when I was sort of prepping for our chat here was that I've had a lot of early brushes with game dev that that didn't quite end up getting me over the fence. Like I didn't really start the game dev journey in earnest, like on this project until pretty late in life, which I think is a little bit unusual, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but like Civilization 2 modding was one of those early things where I kind of messed around and had big dreams and big plans. But as it turns out, game development or mod development is hard and it takes a lot of time, and you really have to want to focus on it. And when there's a whole game sitting there, you could just play instead of spending all your time modding. It can be a little bit distracting.
Because that's something that I'm struggling with now. Is I struggle very much to find sort of the rhythm between making games and playing games. I either make them or play them. It's very difficult for me to sort of like sit and make games because I do it full time. So to sit and make games the whole day and then play an hour at night, like that's sort of a difficult rhythm. And I think for someone like you that does it part time, it must be even more difficult because like you don't really have that time at night to play games. You either play or you make, and because I mean, I'm assuming, but that's what it would seem like to me.
Yeah, it is definitely a challenge, and it's one that I struggled with for many years of wanting to make games and kind of starting and stopping. I think that's a pretty common story, and a lot of people can identify with that. And I think I went over this in some of my devlogs, just kind of how I slowly transitioned myself away from a lot of gaming time, like especially excessive gaming time, to putting more of that energy into other things in my life, whether that's game development or hobbies out, off the computer. Because when you work full time on a computer and then your hobby is also a computer, like you spend a lot of time in the chair, and that has some negative effects on your health, on your mental health, on your social interactions and things like that. So I think one of the things that I realized was that when I spent a lot of time, especially in the builder type games, I was trying to get the creative impulses out. I was trying to build things and put things into the world. But let's be honest, in most cases, whatever you're building in Minecraft or, whatever game, I mean, I didn't spend a lot of time in Minecraft, but I know that's something a lot of people do. So your builder game of choice, City Skylines, Factorio, Minecraft, whatever. Most people aren't interested in what you built in that game. They might see it and go, "Oh, that's cool," but then they're not gonna. There are exceptions, of course. There's creators who spend, thousands of hours and have whole YouTube channels, but you really have to dedicate yourself to that, I think. The things that I was building were fun for me, but not really super interesting to anyone else. And it was difficult to identify the point at which, like, when does the point of a 4-hour or 6-hour or 8-hour building session in your game of choice go from this is a fun creative expression for me to now I'm avoiding my responsibilities or avoiding doing, the hard things in life or doing things that might be harder at first but maybe more fulfilling later. I would take a look around at my the next factory hall I was building in Satisfactory and be like, why am I doing this? I'm building this whole world and I'm probably going to get bored of this game in like 30 hours or so, and all this work is going to be for nothing. It was that nagging feeling that what I was building, like, not only was not no one else going to be interested in it, but even that I knew that I wouldn't be interested in it in a little while.
Yeah. It's as you're saying this, I'm actually remembering the video. I watched it a couple of weeks ago, so I recall some of the things that you're saying now, and it's true. I think gaming in general has that effect on people. For me, when I started gaming in terms of like simulation, I was never into like the early civilization games and stuff like that. It was a little bit too complicated. We did play this one game called, I think it was just called Zeus, and there was another one.
Yeah.
That was like an Egyptian one. Don't really remember the name. Probably like Cleopatra or something like
that. Pharaoh, maybe?
Pharaoh, yeah. And then also the Cossacks games and stuff like that.
Okay,
but when I really got into management in games was this. There was one game and it had a couple of DLCs and it was called The Movies. It was made by Lionsgate. I think the same people that made Fable, actually. This is like 2005. I don't know if did you ever play that game?
I've never even heard of it, actually.
Yeah, it was.
But there's a lot of games I haven't heard of.
Yeah, it's a AAA game, but it's basically this game where you run a sort of like a Hollywood sort of plot of land, and it's like a Zoo Tycoon kind of game where you have to like hire these actors, and you would give them jobs, and then you could go in and make the movies yourself with the actors, but then you have this aspect of the action, quote unquote, where you could make the movies and you could like write out the scripts and stuff, but you also have the management side of it where it's just like a lot of you have to like keep your actors happy. You have to like get them the big trailers, and it was kind of like The Sims, where it would go from the early 40s or something up to like the late 2000s or something like that. Point being, I got really addicted to it. And a lot of the things you're saying applies to that as well. And that's kind of making me think about design in our own games in terms of, you probably know who Thomas Brush is, right?
Yeah. Is he the one making Twisted Tower right now?
Yeah, exactly.
Right guy? Okay.
Yeah, he's like a big YouTube guy. Yeah, it's the right guy. He also made Pinstripe and those games. And so I listen to a lot of his videos, and a lot of the stuff that he says is interesting, but a lot of it, so he always talks about the hook of your game, right? And what makes it unique. And he has this thing called the Trinity hook. And that's how you get people to play the game. But I've been thinking a lot about what I guess I would call responsible design, where it's this thing where I guess you would want to avoid getting people addicted to your game, but at the same time, you want people to play your game, and it's kind of like a catch-22 in that way. because this isn't really something that I've seen a lot of, is sort of like responsible development in terms of, well, I guess it's becoming more commonplace in the AAA sector, and it's becoming a lot more humanized in that way. But yeah, is that something you've thought about? Is how long would people play your games, and how long would you want them to play them?
Yeah, it definitely is. It's funny that you say that because, I mentioned that my 40th birthday is approaching, so it's, the typical midlife crisis stuff. But just sort of rethinking, how am I spending my time? How am I spending my days? There are only so many of them. What do I want
Yeah.
to be doing? And even things like, do I want to be spending this many hours and this many days on game development? How important is that to me? So far, the answer has been yes, that's something I want to do, but it's been with a more like eyes open, understanding what that means trade-off wise for the rest of my life, like sacrificing, what time am I sacrificing? What else could I be doing with my time? But I have also thought about the, you know, especially when I've had like the devlog talking a little bit about video game addiction. Like, it is a little weird to be talking about video game addiction and how I'm spending less time playing games so that I can make them, so that I can give something to someone for them to play. It's a little bit like, oh, I don't do drugs, but I do deal. Um, so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I have one of the things, maybe we'll get into it a little bit more later, but one of the things I've been thinking about a little bit more, like you said, with the hook, with the game loop, is maybe being respectful of the player's time. And that can be things like, how long does it take for the player to experience the biggest variety of content that the game has to offer? Like, if your game has, let's say, just say 10 character classes, but it takes 100 hours for each character class for you to level them up or do whatever. Well, now for that player to really, experience, all the classes, if they want to level them up to the end game, like now they've got multiple 100 hours, that, they can either choose to play one class for 100 hours and, never see the other classes, or they can choose to play each class for 10 hours and never see the end game with any of them. It's kind of tough. So
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
of the
And
early, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but I think a big problem with that, in my mind anyway, is the fact that there are just so many games now. Like, I'm currently playing Skyrim again for the 10th time, and it's
Yeah,
like
right.
every time you can do a different build, and that's kind of what I'm alluding to. But then on the other hand, it's also, it's, if the game is worth replaying for a 10th time, then they had to have done something right. So it's kind of like, it's a difficult conversation, because I don't feel like there's a right or a wrong answer. It's just sort of what the developer wants to do. But with the kind of games that I make, there are not short games, but there aren't repetitive games really. When I think about games that you would replay a lot, I would think about the sort of, I don't know, really games that I play, but like the Hadeses and the roguelikes, and even some RPGs and stuff. But I think the point is just like, me being 30 now, time is a lot more valuable, and that's kind of what you said as well. It's having to choose what you spend your time on is becoming very important, as a developer. And that's why it's interesting to me that you haven't been doing it for so long, because had you started earlier, I think this problem would have only been in your mind around this time anyway. So it's sort of a thing of, do you now have to make up for lost time in that way, where you were doing other things in your, I don't want to say in your youth, because you're not old, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. It's definitely something. And it's also a little bit tricky. You said, like, there's so many games out there, we have less time for each of them. It used to be that, back when we were growing up, like, I would buy one game and like that would be my one game for months, because that was all the, saved up my, allowance money or something. And
Yeah,
I just had to play the heck out of that one game for months or years. And now it's the opposite problem. Like, I can't, like, I stopped growing my Steam backlog years ago. Like, I used to, like, oh, this game's on sale, I'll buy it. This game's on sale, I'll buy it. And then I never played any of them. So I had to just stop that and sort of realize I already have more games in my backlog than I will finish in my lifetime. So something has to change.
Yeah,
and really
and
just focus on maybe the one or two every year that I really have to, really have to get to.
yeah, and I mean, we'll talk a bit more about Steam in a bit, but Steam has this thing, and it's a business, so it's probably deliberate, but they have this way of making you want to buy more games, and I think it's their achievement system, not just in the games, but they also sort of gamify your profile. And for me, I think I have just under 1,000 games on Steam now, and that's just ridiculous. Like, in 10 lifetimes, I wouldn't be able to play that many games.
Yeah. I don't even want to look. I don't want to know the number. It might not be 1,000, but it's already going to be too many for me.
Yeah, but the thing is, even just like 100 games is too many. You can't play that many games.
Right,
And
especially when some of the great ones. Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine.
I was just going to say, especially when some of the great ones really are worthy of more than like 10 or 20 hours. They might be worthy of 100 hours or, more than that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's that thing of you either have time or money. Well, I don't have either, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's a tough feeling these days. It feels like nobody has either anymore. You have no time and you have no money.
Definitely. So, okay, well, that's interesting. It's interesting to me to hear about, your journey as a developer, because it's so different than mine. For me, I was, right out of high school. In high school, in grade 10, I think the structure here works a little bit differently because I'm South African. I don't know if I mentioned it, but in grade 10, I started to learn Unity. And at this point, Unity was very much a fledgling company. It was still, I think it was Unity 4 at that point, would have just come out. And I don't know if you were experimenting with it, but it had this scene with the little island and these palm trees. And it kind of looked like, you remember the game Far Cry 1, the first one on that, with Jack on that island. It kind of looked like that. And yeah, that's kind of when I started experimenting. And for me, it's been such a long journey with Unity. I have a pretty big asset store with them as well, that I do sell in other places as well, Sketchfab as well. And Sketchfab is actually owned by Unreal, not by Unreal.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they sort of recently acquired them, but they didn't make any changes to the structure as far as I can tell. Which I am very thankful for, because Sketchfab is also one of my sources of income. And I have no problem with Unreal, but when you've been working with a company for so long, it's a very difficult thing to just switch over. And just from the videos, I think you are working in Unity as well. Yes,
I am working in Unity.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more in a sec. But just to conclude what I was saying. So I started doing that in grade 10, and just like, getting the skills, and it's a very much a different thing at that point. But I think also it's a different time, because that's right when that would have been 2008, 2009, 10, around there.
Right around when I was graduating,
Yeah. So that's right around when indie games were really becoming big, and you started to have those breakout games and stuff like that. And I think for me, I saw their successes, and I sort of wanted to replicate it, but it was always passion driven for me. It's never been about money, and sometimes I wish that I didn't think in that way, because I could be a lot more wealthy, so to say. But I must say, for me, indie games have always been a source of happiness. Creating games has always been a source of happiness, and it is that thing of, am I doing the right thing? Am I spending my time in the right way? And I think everyone feels that way. But, for me, I diversify it by doing other things as well. So I really enjoy soccer, football. So I do that a lot, go to the gym quite a bit. And apart from that, I also have this sort of like online store that I run, which is like a PC shop. If you watch the video back when it comes out, you'll see in the background I have like a motherboard just like running on the table.
Oh, okay.
Stuff like awesome. That. So I like sell PCs and stuff, and it's all like in the IT realm. I also studied IT for a bit. I also studied sports science, but didn't end up using that at all. But anyway, so that's kind of been my journey. And then I started to sell things on the asset store and started to make a little bit of money that way. And it's still not a big source of income for me, but it does, it's something. It's a source of income. And I think for myself and probably for you as well, that's sort of why we do YouTube as well, is for it to, one, for the marketing and the exposure, and two, to hopefully become a small source of supplemental income in the future.
Yeah, talking about YouTube would be like a whole another angle to this. I mean, I'm happy to go wherever you want to go with this.
I mean, we don't have to talk about it for long. I'm just mentioning that is kind of why well, it's not the reason why, because I'm mainly doing it just to share my work. Because I have this weird, I don't want to say OCD thing, because people say that all the time, but I have this weird thing where I don't like sharing my work for some reason, and that's a little bit silly, but it is what it is.
I understand that really well. 3-4 devlogs in now, and I have a script in front of me that I'm working on, which is like, what is the game I'm making? It's like, how did you get 4 devlogs in and you still haven't like told people the basics of what you're doing? And I know why. I know why. And it's the reason that you just said, which is like, oh, I'm not ready. Oh, I need to polish this more. I need, it's not ready to show fully. Oh, I'll just talk about the stuff where I was getting started, but I can kind of hand wave that, oh no, don't worry. This is the bad stuff. The good stuff is coming later, and just keep kicking the can down the road of like, well, I'm still working on the good stuff and it's not good enough yet.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, for me, it's a tough thing. I struggle a lot with organizational issues in my head, so to say. So I always want to do things a very specific way, in a specific order, and it almost never works out that way. And I'm trying to let go of that a little bit, but it is tough, when you have these notions of how you want to do things. It is a little bit tough to sort of let go of that, but I think that is something that I've learned to do, also with sharing the work and everything, and sort of getting that community behind your studio and your games. And I don't know if you identify your studio as a studio or if it's just as yourself, but that's also something that I sometimes wish I didn't do, because I called it Align Games, and it's kind of like this studio business. But sometimes I wish that I had just called it my name, and because I feel like there's a bit more of that emotional connection when people can. And this is also the first time that I'm actually showing my face on the channel. It's not because I don't want to, it's just it's not the way that I saw myself doing it. But that's what I'm saying, is I think in this sort of thing in indie design and marketing, you have to kind of let go of some of the ideas that you had. I don't know if it's been that way for you as well.
Yeah, I had a bit of a think about, like, before I put the channel out, I was like, well, do I make? I actually have. There's a hidden channel somewhere, I think, or maybe it's not hidden. There's an Infiniwar YouTube channel that has nothing on it. You could probably find it. It might have like old splash art or something on it. It has no videos or no public videos at least, because I was originally thinking, well, I'll make a channel for the game, and it'll be focused around that. So I had to do the think of, do I make it about me as a person, as a developer? Some people take that strategy. There's a lot of indie devs who do that. There's people who do the other way. And I think in the end, it was kind of just a toss-up. I didn't really know which one would be better for me. I still don't know. It may turn out that I will wish I had done it the other way. I think I'm on the right path, though.
Yeah, I think so.
I like to talk a lot about, sort of the personal aspect of game development. Like, that's part of what I'm interested in. I think, and then from the other side of it, from a marketing perspective, I mean, I'm making the game for me, but it would be cool if other people also wanted to play the game. So I do think about it from that perspective as well. Being realistic, I'm not making a game that's going to be a viral hit. It doesn't have the DNA that viral hits have, and I'm fine with that. Like, I've accepted it, and I know that that's what I'm building. Like, I'm not building the next, Among Us or whatever. What was the big one? Content warning, the one where people are like doing like fake YouTube, getting killed by monsters, or Lethal Company. That's the other one. That was another big, like, that has all the viral DNA in it, and mine doesn't have any of that.
But the thing for me is I don't play those games, so it would be disingenuous for me to try and make it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't play those games. I'm not interested in them. If my goal was build a game business, that's not necessarily a bad path to go. I think it is a little bit of a lottery ticket, because I imagine a lot of people, especially right now, are, I'm going to be the next Lethal Company. I'm going to be the next, whatever big indie hit. There was Balatro or Balatro, however you want to say it. The creator calls it Balatro. I think he said it was the wrong pronunciation. Anyway, he's a solo developer. He blew up overnight. There's 1,000 clones being made like right now to be the next one. Do those people, like that kind of game as much as that developer did, or are they doing it to like, chase the money?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Because I think one thing that I've learned, and I haven't really had a big success or anything like that, but I've learned that the path to success and the path to happiness isn't always the same path. And you can have successful people that aren't necessarily happy with what they've done. And you see that with Notch, with Minecraft. I'm not saying that about Minecraft itself, but it's been a long time before I think he started a new game now, and it's been like 15 years or something.
Yeah.
And I think, the roads aren't always leading the way that people think they would be. And for myself, I've just always chased the passion. And sometimes that is to my own detriment. But I think when you look back, you want to see projects that you made that you wanted to make. And I think that's why I'm so interested in Infiniwar, because it has that sort of look and that vibe, that feel of something that is made with passion, if I can put it that way. So let's shift a little bit to the game itself. Sure. Just tell me a little bit about what the game's going to be. How long have you been working on it? What were the inspirations for the game?
Yeah, sure. So a big thing for me is, like you said, sort of chasing the passion. You have to make a game that not only are you interested in playing, but that you're interested in making. Yeah. And I'm not really in a position to give a whole lot of game dev advice. I've been doing it for a few years now, but I've only been doing it on basically this one project. So there's a lot of people who are more experienced than me, like yourself. I see you've launched a few different games and have a lot of experience under your belt. So I'm kind of coming at this from a little bit of a beginner's perspective. But I think it is really important. I think most people sort of know, I should make a game that I would want to play. That I think is self-evident, although there are some exceptions to that. Like, maybe we can talk about that a little bit later. But Infiniwar is definitely the game I want to play. Hang on. We'll get to that in a minute. But I think you also need to be realistic with yourself about building a game you want to build, because it's easy to say, I want this game to exist, which would be like, it would be great if somebody else who was really good at making games made a game that does XYZ, because I would love to play it. You have to also be honest with yourself about what the reality of the process of building that game will be, and will you be enjoying it? Will you be learning something? Will you be hating it the whole time? Because if you need to build a game that is a viral mega hit and you have to do all the marketing and whatnot, and you hate that stuff, like, you're not going to have a good time. You have to enjoy the process. And
definitely.
So you have
sorry, just to jump in there. I think even games that are fun to build are going to have parts of development that is not enjoyable, and that's that's always going to be the way it is. And for me, that's interface design, something that I'm not very good at. And I think it's a skill to sort of be honest with yourself and tell yourself the parts of game design that you are not the best at, and sort of be okay with outsourcing that, because that's something that I struggle to do as well, because I always felt like this purist thing where if you don't make the whole game, it's not really your game. But that's changed a lot for me as well. And I don't want to veer too much from the topic, because this is getting a little bit into a different thing. But I think those are things to consider when making a game as well. Like, not all aspects of game design is enjoyable.
Yeah, there's definitely some eat your vegetables kind of moments. But I think more people, like, there's the obvious problem of, so many projects that get started and dropped. Like that's a common thread in people who are picking up game development is, I worked on this project for a week and then got bored, got excited about a new idea, picked it up for a week, got bored, and they just go through this cycle of never sticking with a project, which so far I've managed to avoid.
And I was stuck in that for a long time as well.
Yeah, a few starts and stops at the beginning, and I talked about that in my first devlog of, I think that was my stops and starts were more a combination of a confidence issue, as well as just a not having the right game idea. And since we were going to kind of start talking about Infiniwar, the game, I'll kind of shade into that a little bit. What do I mean by the right game idea? There's sort of this notion of a dream game, and that's part of the right game idea because it's something you're interested in, something you're passionate about. But it's only part of the right game idea, because the other part of the right game idea is it has to be something you are capable or can become capable of building or before your interest in the project runs out. And whenever anybody is like, I'm going to build the next MMO, it's like, sure. Like that's a really hard problem. Are you sure? And to some people's credit, they've gone a really long way and gone really far and have done some really impressive things. Some of the YouTubers that I've followed, started on projects like that, and they got an impressive amount of stuff done. But eventually you realize I will never finish this project; it's too big. So,
and that's sort of the scope problem that indies always seem to have. And for some reason, MMOs always get used in this, and I understand why, but I think it applies to more genres than just MMO. I think I've made that mistake as well. With the first game I ever released was a multiplayer FPS game, and it wasn't.
That's mega ambitious. The fact that you released it at all is like a miracle. Honestly, I'm really impressed by that.
Yeah, no, it took me a long time, and sort of in that stubbornness, I'm working on a sequel, but lessons learned and scripts already written, so you can save time, but that's a whole different topic. But the thing is, I think there are a lot of genres and a lot of themes that indies should avoid, and I think that's where you chose well. Because you chose an art style that isn't overly complex, and while your game might be more complex in terms of mechanics, I also feel that the way it's being presented is, I don't want to say simple because that's not what I mean, but I just mean it's fluent. It's not this sort of thing with hundreds of systems. It just seems like a good, mechanically easy to play game. That's the impression I get from it anyway.
Yeah, that's my intent. So yeah, let's maybe get into more about Infiniwar itself. I'm definitely doing a lot of things to keep scope under control. I mean, I'm a software engineer, software developer, web developer in my day job, so I'm constantly thinking about scope. And so I have a really well exercised muscle of how long will it take me to do that thing, especially even if I don't actually know exactly how many hours, like I have a better idea than most people, I think, of how big is this thing? Is this a thing that is going to take me a month, a week, a day, a year? So early on, I made the decision. I don't have a lot of 3D art skills, or I certainly didn't start with a lot. I've gotten some more over the years, but I knew right away high fidelity graphics would be the death of the game idea, because that's a trap you can fall into. Once you decide that you want high resolution textures, let's just say that, like, you just want high res textures. Well, everything else looks out of place with high res textures if you don't also have the top notch lighting effects, and now your models need to be really high fidelity, and now you're stuck with, you either need to purchase or pay someone or model yourself really, high detail, high poly models. And now you've got performance things you need to deal with because you've got all this high fidelity visual stuff, and that's great. But so now you're now you're spending your time optimizing and, you know, spending time in the profiler, and like those are all good things. But I think you have to be realistic about high fidelity visuals, in that when you play most games these days that have high fidelity visuals, they are either an extremely focused experience by, you know, say a solo developer, where they have spent all of their time on that and the gameplay is very limited typically. There's some great examples of that out there. Or the opposite, which is it was made by a huge team that has artists and, you know, a whole content development pipeline, and you will just drown yourself in that if you try to do both. And for me, it was definitely about gameplay. I had I don't want to say a very clear, I had a pretty clear idea in my mind of what I wanted to do gameplay wise, and I knew that I couldn't also focus on high fidelity visuals. I got some inspiration, some early inspiration from, I forget the guy's name. I think it's like Y485. It's like some numbers or something. Anyway, he makes Tiny Combat Arena, which I think got picked up by Microprose at one point, and it's like a retro flight sim with, it's like a retro graphics, like the early not vector graphics, but like the earliest 3D models where there were no textures on anything. It was all just like vertex colored 3D models. You know, the airplanes are like 7 polygons. Okay, they're more than that, but and I looked at that and I said, "Hey, wait a minute! I think I could do." And he's done a great job, and so I haven't approached that yet. But I'm like, I think I could do something like that. Like, Blender is a pain in the butt. You know, I did a video recently on my trials and tribulations with Blender, but I'm like, I think I could get something that looks like kind of a blobby tank going. Like, I can probably do that. That was part of the genesis of the idea behind the visuals that I went with. Because I knew I had to keep it simple because the other ideas were big. So, yeah. So yes, stylized visuals are definitely one of the big scope levers that I pulled early. We can talk about another one, which is multiplayer. It's not multiplayer. Infiniwar is single player only. It is really, I don't want to say, it is disappointing to me. Like, the dream version of Infiniwar is multiplayer, or at least co-op multiplayer. I think that would be a lot of fun. If all goes well, Infiniwar 2 will be I'm committing to it right now. Infiniwar 2 is multiplayer. Okay, don't hold me to that. But
I think that's the right way to do it. You know, you can always, obviously, if the game becomes a big success, you can say, okay, I'm going to add multiplayer, that kind of stuff. But, you know, it's something I do a lot is I have these sort of like dates in my head that I want to add these features and these things, and it almost never works out in that way. So I think to an extent, you know, it's a good thing to say the next one will be multiplayer. You know, when you have that experience and that knowledge, instead of saying, I'm going to add multiplayer to this one. I think the most important thing for indies is just to get something out there.
Yeah, definitely. And really early on, because it was my first project where I was just sort of looking around and being like, I'm still working on it. Like, I couldn't believe it that I hadn't dropped it at that, you know, the first weekend, the second weekend, the first month in. And I really protected the idea that, like, you can't blow up the scope so big at this point that you then feel hopeless because it's too hard. So despite really wanting to go that direction, I knew, no, multiplayer is probably the biggest scope lever you can pull in a game. And especially in an RTS game, RTS multiplayer is pretty complicated. You know, in Unity, especially, like, if you want to make like a casual, you know, like, let's say a casual like co-op game like Overcooked. I don't know if you've played that, where you've got four little characters running around on the same screen making food and burning down the kitchen. There's multiplayer solutions out there for like replicating game objects over the network, where it's like, okay, you've got literally 4 characters and like a few doors maybe and a few platforms and like some food objects. Like, you've got like a few dozen objects you need to synchronize over the network. And my game just isn't that. Like, I haven't looked that much into what you need to do to make a true, like, a non-awful multiplayer RTS. And just like the stuff you need to do is tough because you're synchronizing tons of objects, tons of projectiles, Like you can't do the same kinds of tricks that you do, or at least you typically can't without a lot of work, that you do with like a small scale, you know, like let's say like a 16 player shooter or something like that.
Like an.
And
like
anyway,
an
I don't. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't want to get too deep into that because I don't honestly know that much about it, but I knew sort of that's an area to explore later, maybe with a much smaller, less ambitious experience.
Yeah.
So multiplayer was the next big lever that I pulled scope wise.
So, so you are using Unity for your project, correct?
Yes, yeah, and part of there were a number of reasons that I picked Unity. One was I had earlier experience with Unity on some start and stop failed projects, so I at least knew kind of the basics. Godot wasn't that big of a thing back when I started 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, it was becoming a thing, but it wasn't as big of a thing as it was today. Like you look at today, and everybody's like, "Use Godot, use Godot." Brackeys came back and is doing Godot tutorials now. So
And,
Godot is a much bigger thing than it used to be.
Yeah, it is. It still has a long way to go in terms of coming to a place where Unity or Unreal is. And this isn't the place for the Unity versus Unreal versus Godot conversation, but
yeah.
But I do still think that Unity is a very suitable platform for a lot of people, and I would just say as well, if it weren't for Unity, I would never have had the opportunities that I've had. So it's hard for me to hate them. And also, we might talk about this, in another call or something at some point. But it's also difficult for me to blame developers for the decisions of executives. But let's leave that.
There's a whole separate conversation about the dumpster fire that we could have that we won't have today. Unity was the choice for me. Also, the C# I had a lot of C# background, so it was really really comfortable for me to pick up, and it's very similar to TypeScript, which is what I do in my day job. So that's good. Sometimes it's a little too close, where I'll find myself, if I context switch, I'll find myself typing in C#isms at work and be like, oh crap, that's or I'll do TypeScript things when I'm working on the game, and I'm like, oh geez, this is easier. So I get both. Bumping the mic, I get both sides of the fence there.
That's pretty interesting. So my background is art. And all of the mechanical stuff, all of the scripting and programming stuff is completely self-taught. Well, all of the art as well, but I've always been sort of art adjacent. But it's been a very interesting journey for me to learn programming, and it's something that I enjoy very much. But it's just funny. I remember maybe about 2 years ago, I had this time where I was crunching to get my game out. At that point, it was this game called Death Rattle Hell Unleashed, which is this fantasy kind of Skyrim-like kind of game, a lot simpler, but you know what I mean. And I remember I was working so much on the code that it happened for about 3 or 4 nights in a row that I would go to bed and sleep and actually dream code. And that was just a pretty funny time to me, because I do get a lot of wild dreams. But and that's something that we probably won't get into in this call, but that crunching is also something that indies especially need to be aware of, because for me it was having a release date and not being ready for it. And so if I can give you some advice, it would be to avoid that completely. But I'm sure, with the work that you do, you would have situations like those. Yeah,
I'm familiar with crunch on the other end of things. It just is what it is.
But when it's self-inflicted, it's also a whole different thing. It's a very emotional thing because you get angry at yourself and stuff like that. But there's a lot of resources now, and that's also where the whole YouTube thing is very valuable. Is when I started making games, and probably when you were making mods and stuff, there wasn't the support that there is now in terms of tutorials, and now with the AI stuff, it's a whole different ball game. I think there's a lot more support, and there's a lot more automation going on, and I struggle to see that as a bad thing. AI obviously is it can be both, but I think if you use it, it's interesting the amount of resources out there, really.
Yeah, AI would be like an entirely new topic that I'd be interested to talk about, but we should probably just stay away from it for this call because we'll get really far afield of what we intended to talk about, I think. But yeah, totally agree. There's the resources available now. I mean, if you want to self-teach yourself, game development, game design, game art, or all of the above, like there's so much there.
Yeah, definitely.
It can actually be a bit of a problem because there's so much there that you can spend all your days just doing tutorials or watching tutorials and not actually work on your game. So watch out for that, I guess.
Yeah, that's true as well. So I'm curious, your game reminds me a lot about World in Conflict, which is something that, came out right when I was playing a lot of strategy games. So I assume that's one of the big inspirations for it.
Yes. Infiniwar is my love letter to World in Conflict. I loved that game when it came out. I played the demo back when the demo came out, and I honestly, like, first look, I don't even remember why I decided to try it, because I kind of looked at it and I'm like, this looks like one of those games. You know what I mean? Where there's like World in Conflict is a really deceptive game in that it looks different than it is in a lot of ways to me. I think there are games that look like they are. World in Conflict to me looks like a dry stimulation, authenticity. Like, it looks like a game for milsim nerds, and it isn't.
Yeah, I guess.
And that's one of the things that actually one of the things that I'm hoping is a boon for me with Infiniwar's art style is it doesn't look like a game for milsim nerds.
It's sort of that battle bit kind of thing. I don't know if you follow that, but
yes, yeah,
it's more accessible.
I do intend the art style to match with at least some of the accessibility of, like, if you can't identify all the NATO equipment and they're all, all of the, the battle order iconography and all that crazy crap that the milsim nerd games have, that's okay. That's not this game. This game is for you. Do you want to blow stuff up? Do you want jets to, drop bombs on things and make things go boom? You don't need to know what the name of the jet is. You don't need to know, any of that stuff. You just need to think it looks cool and think it's fun to play. That's all.
So have you sort of found a section of that community, maybe in your YouTube or just wherever you do your social media stuff? Have you been able to find people that are interested in that kind of thing?
I think so. It's a little early to tell. One of the things I'm not certain about of the game right now is that I'm making the game that I want to play and one that I'm capable of making, but I also think it fits a particular niche in the market where you've got these milsim nerd games that are very high visual fidelity. They're extremely nerdy. Like, it looks like you're doing some kind of spreadsheet on a Google Maps overlay. Like, look at a game of like the War Game franchise, and it's indecipherable to me. It looks like gobbledygook. Like, yeah, you can zoom in and see the cool explosions, but when most people are playing that game, it looks like nerd spreadsheets to me. Google Maps overlay with nerd spreadsheets. It's not accessible. It doesn't look interesting. It doesn't look cool. It just looks confusing and jumbled to me. No offense if you like that kind of game. That's totally cool. It's just not for me. I tried picking up the War Game franchise and was immediately like, well, before I even tried to pick it up, I'm like, that doesn't look like it's for me. And then as sort of a market research thing, I'm like, okay, maybe I'll try it. Maybe I'll watch some videos, and I just couldn't do it. It's too far on that milsim nerd spectrum for me to enjoy personally. So that's not the kind of game I'm making. Now, there's success in making games like that. Like, there's a market. On the other end of things, you've got Command and Conquer. It's obviously not going for realism or authenticity or anything. It's going for gameplay. It's going for the over the top, all the over the top stuff that Command and Conquer is known for. It's 100% gamified. Like, nothing is even close to reality there. So it's like there's two opposite ends of the spectrum. Like, and then I'm like, well, isn't there a middle ground somewhere that isn't the classic RTS, but also isn't the milsim nerd thing? And I haven't answered that question yet. It could be that the reason that there's nothing there in the market is that there's no one there. There's no one there for the market. But I'm hoping there's something.
Well,
so we'll see.
I definitely think that there is a gap in the markets, and this data is like a little bit older now. But I remember a couple of years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, there was this stat on Steam, especially where strategy games at that point, I don't know what the stat is now, but they would be the 8 times modifier compared to things like action games or platformers have always been at the bottom. So this is in terms of earning.
Yeah.
And strategy games it's the one niche that is the less fulfilled one in terms of choice, in terms of player choice, I would say.
Yeah. One of the tricky things about those numbers, because I think I've seen those too, is that I think strategy, when they sort of aggregate all the numbers on Steam, a lot of things fall under strategy. Like city builders fall under strategy, and city builders are really popular. So we think of strategy as like traditional RTS, like moving dudes around to shoot at each other on a map kind of strategy. But strategy encompasses when they build those numbers, like city builders and management games and all kinds of things. So
yeah, I do remember in the specific thing that I saw, it was management had its own category.
Oh,
but I think
it did?
Okay. In saying that, because people do tend to categorize things and sort of clump them together in that way.
Yeah. I guess getting back to World in Conflict for a little bit, because like I said, it is my love letter to World in Conflict. I applied for a job at Massive in I think it was 2008 or something, when I was a college student, because I was studying computer science at the University of Illinois, which is I think it's a pretty well-known computer science school. I wasn't a very good student, but let's not focus on that for the moment. I was studying that. I was sort of into military stuff at a surface level. Again, I'm not totally milsim nerd over here, but I was into that stuff. I was taking a military history class as an elective, and I was playing World in Conflict because that was, I think it came out maybe my junior year or something like that. And just, I decided, hey, I'm going to try to apply for a job there. They wanted to make sure that you could communicate in English really well. So I'm like, oh, I'm a native English speaker. Of course, I never got a response from them. And I don't blame them. And of course, I wouldn't have been happy even if they had, because, well, they already made World in Conflict, and they didn't make a sequel. They didn't make any other games that are like that. They moved on to The Division, I think, which, I've never played and wasn't really interested in.
Same.
So, it's a good thing that it didn't end up going that way. Not that I thought it would have, but that was the level of infatuation that I had. Was I applied to work. I still have the cover letter that I sent them and things like that. So in lieu of their accepting my employment, I decided many years later that I'm just going to make a game that is heavily inspired by the game they made, and hope it turns out cool.
Definitely. One thing that I was watching earlier today, actually, I was watching this video of yours that has like a time lapse of your development, and
I just released that.
Oh, okay. And there was this one part that has like a bunch of units. I think it's maybe like a stress test or something like that.
Yeah.
And it has like all of these units, and that really made me think of, now I don't know if you played this, but this is my favorite strategy game of all time, is Supreme Commander.
Yep. Yeah. Supreme Commander is a big, and like that whole line. You've got Total Annihilation, Supreme Commander, Planetary Annihilation. All those kinds of games. So yeah, that's another inspiration for sure.
Yeah, and the thing about that game is the pure scale of it. Is the amount of, maybe it's not so impressive anymore, but at that point, with our little Core 2 Duo CPUs, having up to like hundreds of units on screen at one time was really an achievement, I think, in terms of technology.
Yeah, definitely. And just to be clear, I'm not going for a giant pile of units game. There are games out there that are like that, where they're the developers are really performance focused. I think there's a guy, I can't remember what the name of the game is, but I'm following him on Twitter or whatever the heck it's called these days, where he's like basically running everything about the units on the GPU, so he can have like literally hundreds of thousands of like robots shooting at each other, and it's insane.
Yeah, I might have seen a tweet about that.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the game, but he's doing all kinds of crazy GPU wizardry that is far beyond my current skill level. But that's also not the game I want to make. One of the things that I like about World in Conflict is it is relatively small scale in terms of the number of units. You don't have thousands of units. It's not very realistic for a modern military setting. I'm not that worried about realism. So like, I'm not like, my tanks don't have the proper spacing. They don't have the 50-meter spacing or 100-meter spacing or whatever they're supposed to have. They're right next to each other because it's just convenient. So I'm not going for realism like that. But one of the things that I liked about the World in Conflict gameplay was the sort of more intimate focus on a handful of units, rather than having the map zoomed so far out that you can't actually see what's going on and you're just looking at unit icons the whole time. That's kind of the war game franchise way of doing things. I liked that World in Conflict pulled the camera in and really focused on the spectacle of combat and just the units battling each other. Was one of the main things that I wanted to recapture.
So that would be sort of, if I can pull it to another game, sort of like more of a Company of Heroes kind of vibe, with the unit management being a bit more squad based, so to say.
Yeah. Company of Heroes is another good touch point, and another game that is a big inspiration for me. Obviously, they've got the high visual fidelity, and they wanted things to be really authentically that time period. But yeah, like a really low level focus. And Company of Heroes also does some really cool stuff with like just making you feel more like you're in combat, sort of tugging at some emotional strings of, you hear the guys, their tank gets hit and they get scared. Their tank gets hit by like a German Tiger tank, and they're like, holy shit, it's a Tiger. Like, we got to get out of here. We're going to die. Like, really getting the sort of emotions of combat, is also cool stuff that I would like to get to. Now, a lot of that is going to be tough because, you need to really pull that off. You need really good voice actors, and I am not a really good voice actor. I do my best, but, we'll see. My plan for the project is to sort of evolve it over time. This is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but
it's fine. I mean, I see we've been going for an hour already. So
geez, have we? Okay, all right. Yeah, we'll keep rolling as well as best we can. I see my development of the project as kind of being a long-term thing. One of the benefits of having a full-time job is that I don't have to make decisions based on how do I pay my rent, how do I put bread on the table. Like, I do that with my day job. So I can make longer term decisions. Like, there are games that people develop for years, decades even. Now they're doing it full time. You got games like Terraria and Factorio and Minecraft to a certain extent. Things like that, where the developer just keeps adding stuff. They build the game and they launch a demo, they launch an alpha, and it's really basic. You go back to those games alpha, and it's like a totally different game. But they keep building on it. They keep adding stuff. And there's so many things that I want, so many concepts that I want to try out, so many technical things, graphical things, visual things, mechanical things that I want to try out, that I just don't see myself getting bored. It's almost like I've built myself a game development platform where I don't have the problem of, I got bored and moved on to the next project, because the next project is actually adding this feature or this new thing in the game I'm already building. Wouldn't it be cool if a unit could do this? Wouldn't it be cool if you got, a power that did this? Wouldn't it be cool if there was this game mechanic? Wouldn't it be cool if I could do this in the background?
So you sort of segmented it to be sort of like mini projects in terms of the development cycle.
Yeah, then that is one of the upsides of building a big game as opposed to a really small game. A lot of the advice for indie developers is, build really small. And I'm kind of bucking that trend a little bit, even though I did cut scope on, visual fidelity and no multiplayer. The game is scoped absolutely enormously. It is a bit of a problem, but I am looking at it less of I need to have this done in 2 years so I can move on to the next thing or so that I can pay my bills, and more of like I could see myself working on this for the next decade and I'd be happy with that.
Okay. Well, in terms of how much you work on it and what you kind of think the release window will be, what do you think about that? Do you work on the game like a couple hours a day, or is it more than that?
Well, one of the things that's a little bit tricky is I'm splitting my time now with the YouTube channel. YouTube's a
Yeah.
lot of work, especially getting a new channel off the ground.
Yeah, we are sort of in the same kind of, I think, more or less the same size and the same kind of area with that now.
Yeah, and the algorithm can be really unfriendly to new stuff. People will put their stuff out there and it looks awesome, and they'll get like 30 views.
Yeah, that's tough.
I've had people comment. There was one guy, he's building I forget what he renamed the game. I think it's called Medieval Immortal now. So shout out. I don't remember what his name is. I think it's like Dom Zero or Dom O or something like that. Medieval Immortal is the name of his game. And he commented on one of my devlogs and was like, "Hey, like, your game looks awesome. Great to see you're getting traction. How are you doing it? I made this devlog and I put all this work into this game, and it got like 30 views, and then it died in the algorithm. Like, what do I do?" So, I did my best to give him some advice. I don't have that much advice to give because, kind of new at this, but it's a lot of work to get the channel going. And like, why am I building a YouTube channel around the game to begin with? And I think that's kind of the reason, where there's so many games coming out nowadays. It's not like Steam launches like 500 games a day or something crazy like that. Like, it's probably not that big, but it's like thousands of games every year. And nobody can keep up with it.
It's like 30 games a day or something like that, which is insane.
Okay.
I mean, if you take a look at that, it'll be, probably like 10 of those games are trash. Like, let's just be honest.
Yeah, sure. Or maybe 29 of them are trash.
But even competing with 5 games a day is insane. I mean, it's just it's just too much.
Yeah. And it's like, a while back, I made the decision to transition this is just a hobby project I'm doing for myself and like showing my brother the stuff that I've been doing, to like, no, I think I have something here that I want to put out into the world. Part of this is the, like, back to the, turning 40 midlife crisis. What am I doing with my life? Like, what dent am I making on the universe? And like, there's this game in my head that I have to get out of my head. And this is that game. And that's, I think, why I've stuck with it for so long, and why I keep thinking about the future and how do I get it out there. I think the more people that are interested in it, the better. It would be honestly great. I'm not counting on it. It would be great if sometime I could do it full time. That's like the dream. I have to prove to myself that there's a market for that before I make that leap. I've been sort of carefully, keeping things, close to the chest, working my day job, saving money, that kind of stuff. And if someday I have, it's tough though, because every day that I go to work, I'm like, this is 8 hours I could have spent making the game, but didn't, because I made money instead. And I don't know if I'm doing it the right way, but I'm doing it a way. And we'll see if it works out in the end. But anyway, in terms of like timelines and stuff, you asked about that, right?
Just more or less. You don't have to be specific. I'm just curious. For everyone listening, if people are interested, we'll in a bit we'll talk about where they can find it and where they can find your channel and everything. But I'm just curious what the timelines are, more or less. Even if you can just say a year.
Yeah, I'm trying really carefully to not commit to like really specific timelines, especially far out into the future, just because don't know what life is going to be like 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But one of the goals I'm setting for myself, we'll see if I make it as I glance down at the date, the calendar, is that I really want to have a demo that is at least internally playable. Like, I can play the game right now in Unity. I can make builds of the game where I can play and do the basic combat loop. So that's not a problem. Like I'm not talking in hypotheticals of like, oh, I'm going to build a game because talk is cheap. That game exists and I can play it. It's very rudimentary at this point. There's a lot of mechanics that are unfinished and aspects of the game that are still TBD, still in design. But like the core units fighting each other and taking over territory and winning and losing the game, like that exists already. And I can play it today. But it's not in like a polished form where I can hand a random person a build and just be like, have fun, it's ready for you to play with. Like there's flags that I have in the editor that I turn it on and off when I'm testing things, and all that stuff still needs to be tweaked. And there's various bugs that I've dealt with that I know how to deal with because I'm the developer, that wouldn't be acceptable for even an early demo. Like one of the early ones that really just killed the fun of the game was that the AI didn't understand well enough how to place its drop markers, like where your units spawn. It would just place them randomly, and on certain maps, because I use procedural generation for terrain, there would be like a little lake in the back of the map, and that would be where the AI would choose to spawn its units, and it would spawn like 1,000 boats, but they could never like get anywhere. It was just like a dead end. And as a developer, I was like, okay, that's fine. I can just like delete and re-add that spawn point in the editor. It's fine for testing, but I can't really even expect a demo user to deal with that level of stuff. So like I had a lot of work to do to like teach the AI how to spawn its units in a place where it can navigate them to objectives. So I have various bugs and things that I need to fix to get a demoable version of the combat loop for normal people.
So
my goal for
plan, just to sort of get a demo out.
Yeah. Because I want to start getting feedback on the game sooner rather than later. Like I've been waiting a long time. Like we talked about this at the beginning. Like I sort of slow rolled getting feedback on the game from the devlogs, and even then, like I wasn't showing current stuff. I've avoided having other people play the game because it's not ready. Oh, they won't understand this, that, and the other thing. It's something I need to get over personally, and that's fine. So my goal is this year there will be a demo of some kind, ideally just like some kind of public demo somewhere where you can like download the game and give it a try. I haven't decided on things yet, like some kind of like, should I do a Patreon? Should that be a Patreon perk? Like there's all sorts of things to figure out with that, because
things like Patreon and publishers and funding and investing. But if it's cool with you, maybe we can do a follow-up video and we can discuss those things specifically, and also talk a bit about Steam and talk a bit about what was the other thing that we said was too complicated to discuss? There was something earlier in the chat.
AI and Unity and all that stuff.
All of that kind of stuff. I feel like we still have a lot more to talk about. I don't want to go for too long. So let's give ourselves like another 10 to 15 minutes. And so the idea is to get a demo out, and when you've done that, sort of get feedback, and that's similar to what I've been doing as well. So I don't know if you've seen the game that I'm working on many games, but if you've seen the main one I'm working on currently, it's called Operator 8.
You know what? I have watched some of your devlogs. I was watching the Kingsfield clone ones. I think you changed the name of that one a few times, so I'm not sure what the current name is. So I was watching that one. I did see that Operator 8 exists, and I did see a little bit of footage from it, but I haven't followed it that closely yet. Okay,
well, that's kind of the main game I'm working on. So it's a funny story with the whole Kingsfield thing. So I don't know if you play FromSoft's games, but I actually didn't.
No, I haven't. I've seen them, so they're in the pop culture, but I haven't played any of the Souls games.
So what happened was I knew that FromSoft was popular. And I had a YouTube channel, but I only used it for my trailers, and I only got like 400 views a video for trailers, for like releasing my games and stuff. But I never did any content. And then a couple months ago, late last year, I, for some reason, I don't even know why I did it, but I decided that I'm going to try and make something that people would click on. And because I have another YouTube channel, which is PC stuff, and I've been doing it for 2 years, and it's sort of like stagnated. And I thought to myself, I do enjoy doing YouTube, but I'm getting bored of PCs. So let me try with the game dev stuff. Because I was always going to be a game developer. I was always going to continue to do that, but I never really thought to do YouTube for it. And I saw more and more people are doing it. So I made this first one called I'm making a Kingsfield clone, and it kind of blew up, like not blew up, but it
15K views.
Yeah, it's like just under 16 now, and like that's kind of was like a jumping point for my channel. And since then, I've been sort of like trying different things, failed at a few videos, did well at other videos, sort of getting to know the algorithm, getting to know myself as a creator, and getting to know the kind of content that I like to make. And I've made a few mistakes, but also had some successes so far. So it's definitely a unique thing, and that's actually something that I think we can talk about in the next video, is like, you know, the whole YouTube journey, because I think a lot of developers that will be watching this, and I have no idea how this video will do. Maybe it'll get 50 views, maybe it'll get 500, maybe 5,000, who knows. But the point is, a lot of those guys, you know, the guys that are watching right now, will be thinking, should I make a channel for my games? And we're not going to discuss it now, but I would just say go for it, because for me it worked. And even if you just get 200 wish lists from it, it's something that you didn't have before. And I assume it's the same for you.
Yeah, I don't have anywhere that I'm gathering wish lists at the moment. I haven't put the Steam page up, although that's another thing that I would like to do this year. People have started asking about it. I think someone said it's a war crime that this game isn't on Steam, which I thought was funny.
That is funny.
So yeah, that's something that I want to do this year as well. So yeah, the tough thing for me is that this year is a big balance of marketing, you know, Steam, YouTube, but then also, hey, I need a demo, I need a game. And that has also meant that I've needed to really discipline myself in terms of, I have a ton of stuff that would be really fun to work on for the game that I've had to say, no, stop doing that. There's more important things that need to happen first. Like, yes, cloud VFX is very shiny, and I'm very interested in playing around with the cloud, because the clouds in the game have been the same for like, I don't know, over a year, like almost since the first time I put them in. You can see in the time lapse, like there was like, they got one style change, and they've been literally the same ever since. And it's like a really shiny thing that I want to work on, because there's some cool tech that I saw, but like, no. The game doesn't need better clouds right now.
Metric kind of stuff.
Yeah. Like right now, it's just kind of simple particle system stuff, but there's some VFX graph stuff I want to do that I was waiting on Unity to fix something, and it seems that they maybe have, but I'm like, no, don't touch it. Don't touch it right now.
Yeah.
You need to focus on demo stuff. Yeah. That's actually one of the other challenges, is balancing making a game that looks and reads well for YouTube and for thumbnails and for marketing, you know, Twitter, stuff like that, versus doing the stuff that will make the game fun. And you have to do both. I think, like, or you don't have to do both, but like you have to pick a strategy. And if your strategy is like prototype the game until it's super fun, and then make it pretty, and then make it attractive, then make it appealing, like that's a strategy, but you have to really understand that nobody is going to look at your game until you make it immediately visually appealing. You have to understand, like, nobody is going to look at your gray boxes and be like, wow, that character controller feels so good. Like, it's just not how it works.
But the thing that ties in with that is you need to be ready when you do get that attention. So that's why I think the order you're doing it makes sense. You're doing it in makes sense, because you're prioritizing things that I think are sort of chronologically correct, and I think that's a good way to do it. For the people that are watching or listening or whatever, it is very important to do things in a specific way, because if you do put the visuals first, or the audio first, or whatever your hook is, and if most games just have that visual hook, but the game itself is hollow and shallow, then people are they're gonna see it's a beautiful game, but there's not much more to it, and that's why I think it's important that you do the order correctly.
And so figuring out that
you're doing it well.
Yeah, figuring out like the order to interleave those two things. Because if you just work on visuals and have no game, then you don't really have much to show anyway. You just have like pretty screenshots. Or people will sniff out early, like, what do you do? Like, what is there? So you need to front load some of the visual stuff, but not too much, because there's plenty of visual stuff I could still be working on. But I got it to a point where I'm like, okay, this is good enough. This gets the idea of where I want to go across enough to where I'm comfortable saying that's a good stopping point for now. I will return to visuals later, but now I need to focus on gameplay for the demo. I made a really conscious decision. I can't remember how long it was ago. It's probably a year ago at this point, where I was really in the land of really focusing on gameplay, really focusing on iterating the gameplay, and wanting to get a demo out for like friends and family to help me playtest. That was what my focus was. But once I got the idea of the YouTube channel, I realized this game doesn't look YouTube ready yet. People will look at this and not see the potential that I see until I put more work into the visual stuff. So I immediately set aside, like, I had spent enough time on gameplay to where I was confident, like, okay, this is gonna be fun. I feel like the bones are there and that I can iterate on the specifics later. I have to switch back to visuals. And one of the big things for switching to visuals was actually the camera, oddly enough. Switching to like being able, you can see a lot of it at the end of the highlight reel that I put out, where I'm using Cinemachine now for, Unity's Cinemachine system for cinematic camera stuff. And that made a world of difference, because it makes it so easy for me to just capture gameplay that looks awesome. Like it's before it was like, okay, I'm playing the game and it's fun, but if I record the screen, it doesn't read as much fun or look as cool as it does when you're playing. Yeah. Which is kind of a tough balance to strike. But the moment you've got the cinematic camera stuff going on, like now I can capture stuff that looks badass, and it's pretty effortless. Like I put some time into that system, and now I have like a marketing generator. Like I can just like literally have the AI play a battle. I can have the camera follow some units or follow some, aircraft flying into bomb stuff, and it looks awesome. And it's, varied and different every time. I've got the terrain generator, so there's all the different biomes that it can be in. And, it's like putting the work into that part of the visuals at that point in time. It seems like, why would you do that? Like, that's not gameplay. Shouldn't you be focusing on gameplay? But it makes my marketing getting attention a lot easier right now than it otherwise would be.
And I think it's important to focus on marketing, even from the onset of the project, because if you want, it's all fun and games to make games, but if you want it to be a success, you have to focus on getting it in front of people. But one thing that I just wanted to say, so you said earlier that you weren't sure what the name of the Kingsfield clone is. Just for everyone listening. It's called The Gravebane Curse, and I've already written out an entire. I've kind of like written out a little novel for it. I get way too into things, and then I do too much. So I've written like a little novel for the story, and it ties into the universe for the other game called Death Rattle Hell Unleashed. It's the Uliador universe. So yeah, just for anyone listening, wondering about that. That is also on my YouTube channel. But what I was going to say earlier about Operator 8, that's kind of the main game I'm working on. And in that game, I've also had to do a lot of, recently, because I'm working up to release now, I've had to manage scope a lot and cut things from the game. Things that, because time flies quickly. I've been working on it for 3 years now, and in my head it's been like 1 year. And I think you're probably going to have that as well.
Oh yeah.
And at some point you will have to, and this applies to everyone that is making games, you will have to cut things. So it's important to know what to cut and what not to cut, and when to cut it. So that's just something that is probably going to happen to your project at some point. And that's why I'm saying I think the order you're doing it in makes sense, because focusing on the important things, getting that done first is vital, because then when you get close to those release dates and you do get tired of the project, which is going to happen eventually, you'll have the mechanics in place that is necessary. So I think it's, I commend the way that you are approaching it.
Yeah, it just seemed like the right way to do things. Although I make it sound like, oh yeah, this is fine, but I have struggled with thinking about what order should I do things in, and it's so far it's working out. And I'm sure we could talk a lot more about that if we have another chat, which I would totally be open to. By the way, this was a lot of fun.
It was. I think in my head I was like, probably we're not going to run very long because I don't really know what I'm going to say, or because for me this is the first time doing it.
Yeah, me too. Also, yeah.
Yeah, but I just thought to myself, there's so many of us indies sort of starting this YouTube thing now, but no one's really like talking to each other. And I thought, well, let's do that because we can cross-reference some of the audience, and other developers can see what we're working on. And I think it's valuable to talk about our experiences, and developers have different kind of ways that they work and things that they work on, and backgrounds. So it's been really interesting to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, and you as well. And yeah, I think it's a really good idea. There's sort of like a renaissance going on in like the indie game dev marketing space. There's like weird viral trends on Twitter and things like that, of like, there was that one guy who made his, like, it was like 4 images of like, here's my game and here's the 3 games that inspired it, and then like everybody picked it up and was like doing that thing to amplify each other and just get the word out there. So I think this is a really good idea, especially if you've got the bandwidth and the capabilities. Like you said, you had an editor, so which is really nice, by the way. I hate editing videos so much. It takes so long.
The editor is my brother, and
right.
he does editing for a job.
He's probably really good at it too. Super jealous here.
So for me, I haven't actually used him up to now, but I think I'm going to start now. Gotcha. I have some extra freelance clients, so probably going to start paying him to do that for me, because that's, for anyone wanting to start YouTube, it takes a lot of time. You have to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
But one last question to sort of end on here. Have you ever heard of the game Tar, The Burden of the Crown?
I don't think so.
Well, it's a really old game, and I want you to check it out when you can. How do you spell it? It's the Russian word Tar, so it's Tzar. I think it is at least. It's just a deep cut. It's like a really, really cool strategy game that I used to love as a kid. But
okay, I will have to look into that one.
So tell us a little bit about your channel and where people can find you.
Yeah, so I think I'm just Joe Theis at YouTube or whatever. I don't think this will mess things up if I pull this up right now.
Yeah, we'll put everything in the description as well.
Your
YouTube channel, and everything.
I'm just at Joe Theis, Theis on YouTube. The channel has, oh god, that's loud. Okay, the channel has mostly the devlog content. There's some older gaming content, and then I was recently playing in the Broken Arrow beta, which is a real-time tactics game inspired by World in Conflict. At least I'm on brand, right?
I haven't heard of it, but I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It definitely takes it in a different direction than I'm taking it. But it's cool to have like some interest in that space again. So I was having fun with it, and it was good that it was different enough that what I'm doing, where I didn't feel like, oh god, there's a AAA studio that's just taking my game idea and gonna do a better job than I'll do, because that's of course the nightmare for an indie developer, is that some AAA studio just basically makes a higher budget version of your game, and then everybody's like, this is just a low budget X.
Yeah, definitely. So you just have to check their release date closely.
Yeah. But yeah, at Joe Theis on YouTube, Theis, and they'll put. You said you were going to put the link in.
I'll put it on the screen and put it in the description. Everything. I think we'll probably, if you want, you can just post this on your channel as well, and that way we'll cross-reference, and you can put my things in your description as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and we can talk about whatever Twitter promotion and stuff we want to do as well.
Yeah, definitely.
We want to coordinate
I think
that.
offline we'll schedule another call because I've definitely enjoyed it, and I think there's a lot more to be said. But yeah, we only have so long at a
Yeah,
time.
of course, of
And I
course,
don't
of
think
course. And it's
anyone
late. It's late by you too.
yeah.
You're
It's not so bad. It's like 10 p.m., so it's not
right.
too bad. But yeah, let me just tell everyone about my things as well. So
Sure.
I'm working on a couple things. I'm working on a Kingsfield clone game, which is an early FromSoft game. So, like Elden Ring and the Dark Souls games. I'm working on a first-person variant of something like that, an old PS2 game, which I recently picked up, which is kind of cool because I still have my PS2. And then I'm working on a game called Operator 8, which is a Doom meets Dead Space kind of game. It's a very atmospheric survival horror game set on the moon Triton. So you can go check that out on YouTube. And then I am working on a multiplayer shooter called Grunt 1991, which is based on the conflict in Sierra Leone. If you want to see the gameplay, there is a gameplay trailer out now. And then I have a bunch of other stuff as well, but I'm going to cut it there because it's getting a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. I did see a little bit of Operator 8 footage recently, and I was like, "Wow, this looks like Doom." And my brother loves that kind of game, so I'm gonna have to send him a link. Is there a demo or something? Is it playable yet or not? Not yet.
Yeah, it's in early access, but there's a free demo as well if anyone wants to try it. Yeah, it is the game that I sort of. Me and my brothers used to play Doom 3 when we were little kids.
Yep,
And,
same. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like good memories. So that's one of the inspirations. And it's quite a unique game. It has like what I call a high definition pixelation kind of look. So I think it's quite atmospherically very heavy. So I think people will probably enjoy that. And my YouTube is Align Games. I think that's it. And my website for my studio, I'll just put in the description. So yeah, with that said, thanks, Joe. I enjoyed this a lot. I think it was a lot of fun, and we'll definitely chat some more in the next one.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and looking forward to it.
Sounds good. Okay, I'll talk to you later. Cheers.
Take care. Bye.